this is a very interesting experience that I had once. Basically, I was sent to this distribution center. We just implemented the system and they just turned it on and they had gone live and they were having issues, right? I mean, they were, for whatever reason, their throughput was not, the throughput was supposed to go up with the new system because the processes are efficient. The system is, very sophisticated, high speed, very stable, highly reliable, state-of-the-art system. From what they had before, the throughput is supposed to go up, but the throughput was actually less than what they had before. So the SVP is ridiculously mad, and they sent me. I was a design lead / project manager, like a process / system expert that could look at processes and help eliminate bottlenecks. Make sure things are flowing really smooth. So I was sent to this distribution center, and this was the complaint, and I literally walked into this SVP's office, and this guy was so angry and yelling at me, and he was telling his story. Hey, we bought this DC and in an auction, and we had this great process before, and it was working. I mean, it wasn't state of the art, it wasn't like great technology or anything, but it was working so well for them, and they were hoping to get some significant throughput gains with this new state of the art system. And the system is great. Obviously, it's a state of the art system, and it had some amazing functionality, and it had so many capabilities, and the people that implement the system were very knowledgeable, and they did a great job. But unfortunately, there were some bottlenecks that were somehow got into the process, and typically when you're implementing such a system, you don't know everything up front. I mean, you're making assumptions, and you're running on those assumptions, and then only when you implement, you really figure out, hey, the data was not correct, or that's not how the real right interpretation of the data is. Looking at the sales history and order history and all that helps to some extent, but there are they're going to be bound to have some surprises. So that's what happened in this case, and I walked into that DC, and then I spent a few weeks there, and then figured out, hey, what the problem was, and then helped fix the problem. I mean, obviously there were some minor tweaks, minor changes to the processes and changes to the system. So finally they got the throughput, and it was all flowing fine, and it was a significant improvement from what they had before, and they were able to get the best use of the system. So it all worked out. What would have helped? What would have helped us? A great simulation system early on, right? There was another similar story that I went through. This was another major retailer in Ottawa, Canada, and we did a great implementation as well. And I was representing the system vendor, and we were very good in processes, and we were very good in systems. I mean, more focused on systems, and we would fall back on some functional experts that would really do the process design, and those experts will validate, by looking at the order history and sales history and the, SKU history to some extent, understanding what the fast-moving SKUs are, slow-moving SKUs are, conveyables, non-conveyables, all that aspect. They would, validate the process that we come up with, and they'll say, hey, this process makes sense, and it would, work well, and you will still get the same throughput, and you will still be able to get your work done with the same amount of labor, and the system would be fast enough and all that, right? So that's what they did, and we had a great design. We did a end-to-end design, and these process experts validated that and said, hey, okay, go ahead with this design. This design is approved, and everybody signed off on it, and we ran with it, and we implemented that design. But what we found out was, after implementing it, we had people that would work for like 12 hours. Normally that work was done in 8 hours, 9 hours time, and they would have some, there is always going to be exception. So they'll manage with some, worker working late or working early, but this was not the case in after we did. It was like just people were working really late, and it wasn't, giving the speed that we wanted. So, what would have probably helped to some extent was a great simulation tool, right? If you could take a design and then put it in the simulation tool end to end, right? And then execute the simulation tool, run the simulation tool and look for bottlenecks, look for, process improvements, look for, potential hiccups, hey, where things could go wrong, right? I mean, whatever data you have, it's all, very difficult to just interpret as such, right? When you can feed that into a simulation tool and validate the design right before implementation, that would be something, a nice tool to have early on, even before deciding, hey, this design is perfect, or at least have a couple of backup plans just in case, right? So that's something to think about if you're embarking on a major WMS implementation for your entire supply chain network. I mean, if you're a multi-billion-dollar retailer or distributor that has multiple distribution centers, and you're embarking on this major WMS rollout or overhauling your supply chain, that's something to think about. That would add a lot of value early on to validate if the process that you guys have for the first DC, hey, is it really good? Put that in the simulation tool and see where the potential bottlenecks could be, what type of hiccups that you could expect, so you can have some backup plan. Think about some alternatives and things like that. That's something to think about when you're especially when you're looking at a major overhaul of your supply chain infrastructure. Implementing WMS in multiple distribution centers, in your distribution center, in your supply chain network.